Can everyone hear me, or can at least you hear me?
Yes, sounds good.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share out my desktop so that I can get started with my presentation.
All right.
Okay, let's get this slideshow going here.
All right, we can see that great. Looks good.
Wonderful. So I'm going to be switching back and forth between the slideshow and a demonstration system so that we can not only talk about the functionality but also see what it looks like. Now, unfortunately, I'm not up in the Utah mountains today, but as Key mentioned, I am with Novell. I'm a technical sales specialist, and this happens to be our headquarters in Provo, Utah. And beautiful building, beautiful location, and one of the things, as Kim mentioned, is that BrainShare is coming up this fall, and very often we schedule trips down to visit our facility, so if that opportunity comes up, feel free to take advantage of it. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the endpoint security management solution that's part of the ZENworks family. And what I've done here is pull together a list or a chart of the different areas that we cover within ZENworks. So many of you might be familiar with the ZENworks configuration management, but we have extended that to include additional functionality, and that includes the asset management and patch management, which are part of the integrated console, as well as the endpoint security management. Now, one thing that you might see on this chart that is new to you is the full disk encryption. This is a new functionality that will be available at the end of this year. It's being released in ZCM 11 Service Pack 2. We are just about to release Service Pack 1 at the end of this month. So a couple months later, we'll be releasing the full disk encryption as an additional add-on functionality to the ZENworks family of solutions. Now, if you are just interested or just purchasing endpoint security management, it is available as a standalone based on the same architecture, and the full disk encryption can be plugged into that as well, in addition to extending a configuration management infrastructure. So when we talk about configuration, endpoint security, really it is about that shark in the water and never knowing when it's going to come and attack you, whether internally or externally. I would talk about endpoint security management as really being the tool that allows you to protect yourself from your users. And this is despite their best intentions, or in some cases it's because of their worst intentions. So it's protecting the users from themselves. And really what it comes down to is making sure that you don't get bitten. And this could be a laptop being lost with critical information. It could be somebody bringing in a USB drive or their iPhone or their Droid device and copying data onto it and walking out the door. Your Wi-Fi connections having vulnerabilities, also your various ports having vulnerabilities. So it's all about preventing this scenario. And from a perspective of the risk that's involved, there are some numbers here that represent the cost and the risk associated with unsecure endpoints. So as you can see, these are pretty big numbers. The average cost down at the bottom is $41,000. I recently heard of one of the breaches that occurred where it was more on the lines of hundreds of thousands of dollars just due to the vast amount of Social Security identity information that was on in this case it was CD-ROMs that had been misplaced or mismailed, basically lost with a lot of privileged information. So as you can see, it's pretty much a no-brainer that there needs to be a way to control data that is on the devices where it can be removed easily, lost, or hacked into. So really the goal is for you to be able to sit back, relax, and ensure that the data that's supposed to be internal and stay internal does so. Now here's a list of a number of our different customers that are currently running endpoint security management. And you can see this runs from everywhere from government and defense organizations to finance organizations, to healthcare, and to manufacturing. So there isn't one specific area that it requires security, but it does go across the board. Now, one thing that's interesting, if you notice in the second to last column that we have the second item listed there is Technicolor. And they happen to actually invest in the endpoint security management because there are a number of movies that get sent to them for pre-production or what is the correct term? Yeah, pre-production processing. And because of the risk of movies being pirated or released prior to the official release date, there was a great concern about the user's ability to copy that movie onto a removable disk or removable drive and then make it available to the public. So there's a kind of a different scenario where protecting the data that is entrusted to the organization can occur. So when we talk about endpoint security, there are many different areas that need to be addressed, and I've mentioned briefly already the USB, the laptop itself being removed, the wireless, and very often there are solutions for each of these separate areas. But what we've done is brought those all together into one toolkit, and really it is the Swiss Army knife of endpoint security. So when we look at this chart, it really shows us all the different areas where we provide the security functionality. Now, as we go around the circle, I'll be jumping into the actual live product so I can show you what each of these different areas looks like when you're configuring your policies. At the very top at 12 o'clock, we've got data encryption. So data encryption is for file and folder level encryption, where you can identify a safe harbor of one or more drives, where any data written to that directory is encrypted. Very similar is the USB hardware control, where you can specify whether a USB drive is read-only, read-write, or disabled entirely, as well as whether the data written to that drive is encrypted or not. So switching over to the interface, if I come in and look at my policies, got a couple already set up. And for those of you who are familiar with ZENworks, this interface should look familiar. Here I have my storage device policy, and if I look in the details, I can see the settings that I have set already. So in this case, it's with my autoplay or auto run is disabled. I'm inheriting my CD or DVD functions from my global policy. I can also set these to be, for example, read-only, maybe make that disable on my floppy drive, and on my removable storage, make it read-only. So I've put some enforcements on there. In addition, I can specify any preferred devices that I wish to allow and specify settings on as well. So if I also go in then into the USB, looking at the details here, you can see I have a number of different functionalities. So I can enable or disable USB devices. I can change the access settings as well. And then what we can do too is even refine it further. Now, if you have a USB device, obviously there are keyboards, there's mice, there are a variety of other printers, USB printers. Most external devices today are USB. So by default, we enable the human interface devices. Of course, if you wanted to, you could change those. You can see there's also settings for mass storage class, for printing class, and also for scanning and imaging. Now with USB, you can also be very specific to allowing certain devices or certain classes, and then identify whether they can be allowed or not allowed. So this can allow you to set it up so that you have disabled USB read-write for all USB devices, so all thumb drives, iPhones, Androids, except for ones that fall under the certain either manufacturer products down to serial number, and those can be associated to groups of users or specific users or specific devices. So there's a great deal of granularity that you can go to in your control over these USB devices. From a data encryption perspective, this particular one also is at global, but this is where I can allow for encryption. So I can put in a safe harbor, I can specify the location of that safe harbor on the machine, and then I can also determine whether I want to allow the users to be able to decrypt those files so that they can send it as an attachment without any issues, and also whether or not I want to enable encryption for my removable storage devices, so my USB devices, for example. So those are the policies for data encryption, USB, and for storage devices. Actually hadn't gotten to that one yet there, but that's the removable storage control and the CD, DVD, and floppy controls. Moving down to wireless security. So wireless security, and at this point actually it's very helpful to understand this location-based enforcement, because the wireless security can vary depending on where you are. So if a user is in the office, they might have different requirements around wireless than they do if they're on the road. And one thing there is that this wireless security and VPN enforcement can be tied together, in that if I am in a coffee shop or at the airport or even on an airplane and I'm accessing wireless, I can set it up so that the policy upon connection to a Wi-Fi, an unknown Wi-Fi point, automatically dials up the VPN so that you avoid a split tunneling situation. And therefore, all internet communication is routed through the VPN and therefore secured by the security within the VPN and the internal firewall within the organization. So the other thing I can do is when you're in the office and you're hardwired in, I can disable wireless security. So let's take a look at what that looks like. And I actually have two different Wi-Fi. So I have on my Wi-Fi unknown, I have it configured to specify a minimum security level and display a message indicating why the user cannot connect if that is an access point not meeting that security level is met. By comparison, when I have my global Wi-Fi, this applies to the organization as a whole, I have disabled my ad hoc and inherited my Wi-Fi connection from the global policy. So in this case, I have a different set of settings for this particular location than I do for my unknown location. And what I can do as well, when I create one of these security policies, let me just go back into the unknown, is that I can add specific Wi-Fi access points with the SSID and or MAC address, and either approve or prohibit those particular locations. So if you want to, again, considering that location aware, set up a access to the internal Wi-Fi, which might vary from building to building or location to location, you can actually create policies for each of those locations with the SSID in order to control where those users are connecting to. And back to our chart here, and moving on to 7 o'clock. So with application control, you have the ability to blacklist applications. and have two different levels of control over that application. It can be completely blacklisted, it can't be run at all, or you can also put a restriction on that application in that it does not have network access. So a great example of this is perhaps you want to allow your users to bring their iPods in, be able to play music from any of their music devices, whether it's on their phone device, their iPad, their iPhone, their iPod, but you don't want them going out to the internet in order to purchase or download movies or music. So in that case, I could specify iTunes as having local access only, and I believe I have an example of that here. So if I go in and I look at my iTunes, I set that up so that it has no internet access. So either I can say no restrictions, that's almost like whitelisting an application. No execution means I cannot run that application, period. So again, a great deal of granularity. I can apply this, in this case it's global, so no matter when a person is running iTunes, it has no internet access. So I might want to set up a second one to say when you're outside of the office you can get internet access to it, but if you're inside the office you cannot. That's my application control. So the integrity and posture basically is ensuring that these policies that we've talked about so far are enforced, as well as verifying that the specific levels, or actually the best way to describe this is to refer to another example, which would be your antivirus, or maybe even your firewall settings. But antivirus is the most common, where when a user connects into the network, you may want to verify that they are at the latest version of the definition file for the antivirus before even allowing them to connect to the network. So essentially what this is doing is allowing you to put a device into quarantine until it has been updated with the latest patch or antivirus information. You could also do this on the patches. Now, for this to function, obviously there needs to be a server that they can be redirected to in order to download or update that antivirus in order to be verified and allowed onto the network. So again, integrity and posture is the ability of enforcing these policies and also validating the applications and the status of that system before it attaches to the network. I'm going to skip over advanced scripting and come to that a little bit later. Another of the controls that is built in is the port control. So this is your FireWire, Bluetooth, IRDA, serial parallel ports, any of those ports. And we're finding that a lot of people are completely locking these down, especially as there have been a number of stories in the news of people being able to access systems even when they're turned off if they've been stolen through a variety of different ports, even through the FireWire. Now the port control, and I believe I have one of those if I can see it. Of course, I am not seeing it right off the top of my hat. So I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But the last one is the personal firewall. And the personal firewall is actually at the driver level. So it is enacted prior to the operating system booting up and provides additional benefits due to that. One of those is integral to this client self-defense. So if someone tries to uninstall the application, even if they have administrator rights, they will not be able to. First of all, they require the ZENworks administrator password to do an uninstall. But even if they were to delete some files or hack the registry to try and remove the client, it will self-correct itself. If it happens often enough, the machine will reboot, and at the point of the system booting up, the client will re-enable itself, and that's all built in and enabled because of this driver-level enforcement that we have, which not only allows you to do the firewall at that level, but also to ensure that the client is running, because a security system is only as good as the client that's enforcing that. So if it's easy to remove the client, obviously it makes it very hard to enforce your policy. So that's a very important part of the product. You can choose whether or not to enable the firewall. The product can be used without the firewall enabled. But if I go in here now and look, you can see that there are a number of different settings that you can have. So my default behavior right now, I might want to make that a stateful firewall. Then I can come through and change any of the different access controls to allow specific control from any of these devices. And then I can also add access control lists with showing my different behavior for a variety of address types, whether it's IP, MAC, or macro. So again, great deal of flexibility and detail can be built into the system. In this case, I've actually also specified to disable the Windows firewall. I could say, no, I don't want to disable the Windows firewall. I want to use both. So again, the security policy. Now, the way that these policies are created is through a set of wizards. So when I go through, maybe I want to do a security settings policy, new policy, and I'm going to enable self-defense. I'm going to enable the uninstall password, and I'm going to specify a password here. And I'm also, oops, I'm fat fingered that. I'm also going to put a password override. I'm going to have to try a simpler one. There we go. And when there's a password override, this allows you to provide to the users a way of overriding the default settings, so that if somebody is on the road and not connected to your network and there's a policy that's restricting them from, for example, a Wi-Fi connection, you can actually provide that override to the user. And then I'm going to define additional properties, because in this case, I actually want to assign it to a particular group of users. So I'm going to add that to all my workstations. And I could drill in and make it specific to groups of users or to devices themselves. But another thing that I'm going to do is add a, let's see, what else am I going to do? And I'm going to go in and select a handful of machines. Okay. So now I have published this, and it is now associated and available for that group of workstations. So if I were to go in and look at the workstations, let me go back one here, and look at the relationship, I can now see that that new policy that I created is associated to that group of devices. Now, for different policies, you have different options. If I look at my Wi-Fi policy, for example, what I've done in this case, excuse me, under details, is associated the Wi-Fi policy to unknown locations. So in this case, this particular policy is applied when we are out of the office and, for example, at your coffee shop or again in the airport or on an airplane. I can also go and look from a configuration perspective at the different locations that I have defined to see the different policies that have been associated. Now, There are a variety of different policies that are from Endpoint Security Management. These two happen to be configuration management policies. So in this case, using my location, I have associated a particular printer and bookmark policy based on this location. If I look at, by contrast, my unknown location, here it is where I have a specific VPN policy and Wi-Fi policy. And if I go into my VPN policy, we can see that I have a trigger based on the unknown location. And this is where I could put in the command to connect to the VPN of your choice that you're using internally. Okay. So again, the way this works is that you would define your location, and then the locations can be associated with the different policies. And for those of you who are using ZENworks Configuration Management, the policies can apply to your Windows policies such as bookmarks, folder access, printers, etc. Another thing to mention here is that we do have this directory services integration. So if you're using Active Directory or eDirectory, you're able to connect into one or the other of those directory services so that you can do your assignments based on user as well as based on device. There are a number of reports and alerts that you can set based on your policies in order to be notified when somebody attempts to do something. Let's say your USBs are locked down, somebody attempts to write to a USB drive, that would be reported back and allow you to see that type of behavior. And then again, as I mentioned, the location-based awareness. Now, just to more graphically demonstrate this, that location awareness really allows you to identify what happens when a user is in a particular location and what behavior the security policies should have on them. Because obviously in the internal network in a corporation, the security is supplemented by the settings at the firewall level or at the corporate network level. So maybe you can reduce some of those settings on the device itself. But when a user is outside of the office, obviously there are greater concerns about the ease of access to the data, whether it be from a stolen device or a malicious attempt to attack that device either through a Wi-Fi connection, a rogue Wi-Fi connection, or by copying data off onto a disk. So when you're looking at location-specific policies, for example, with my Dallas location, you can see here that I have a mix of different policies. I have some printer policies, I have a power management policies. Again, these are my configuration management policies. And then I have my serial ports and USB policies that are specific to security, endpoint security management. So again, being able to control and lock down things based on, in this first level, your configuration management policies, and on the second level, your endpoint security. And then in my Amarillo location, which happens to be where my construction offices are, I have a different list of policies. And here you can see I've got some extended policies where I'm looking at my blacklisting applications. I have a different USB policy setting than I do in Dallas. And I also have a firewall policy, which I don't have at the Dallas location. Again, being able to control things from the configuration layer as well as the endpoint security level. So really what we're trying to do is bring you to the Zen state of having confidence that your devices are protected and that your users are protected from themselves. As Q mentioned before, we do have the brain share coming up, and there'll be a number of different sessions on endpoint security. And one thing that I do want to mention is that if you're looking for more details on all of this, Our endpoint security management website is an excellent reference. First of all, because all the features are listed, and I'm actually going to go full screen here, where it goes into each of the controls, so you can look at extended information for, in this case, for USB security. But even better than that is if I go to the resource library here, there are short videos on every single one of the security layers that we have within the product. And remember, these are not separate solutions. These are all part of that Swiss Army knife that are fully integrated into one product, and also possible to enable if you are an existing ZENworks configuration management customer. So I highly encourage you, if you're looking at more information, each of these is 4 to 6 minutes long. If there's anything specific that you're interested in looking at these videos to follow up on the call that we're having. Now, another thing that's also very interesting, and I have these URLs available in the deck as well. If you need a copy of that, let me or Q know. But this is the this website. Let me scroll up to the top here. Is a website that shows you the different kind of breaches that occur. So I selected a number of different ones that are basically covered by the ZENworks Endpoint Security Management. I'm going to just scroll down to a couple of key ones that you probably have heard about or may not have heard about. So here's a hack that occurred on the Toshiba systems, where we have nearly 8,000 records that were gathered through this illicit activity. Another one, if I go down, it is, what did I want to show you? There was a good one here, a little bit further, that everybody's heard about. Here we go, the California Department of Public Health. So in this case, we had 9,000 state employee information that were copied to a private hard drive, and the person attempted to leave the building with that. They actually were, the drive was recovered, but that was a case of if there had been an endpoint security solution in place that was controlling data being written to an external drive, this could have been avoided. Another one, and as you can see, these are all just from this year as I scroll down, and a lot of them are relatively recent. This one is one of the biggest ones that we heard about recently. Here was the theft of a laptop, where you had health information for 43,000 consumers and 35,000 clients. That was a big one. But as you can go through, you can see these things are happening on a fairly regular basis. And of course, the biggest one that we all heard of earlier in June was the hack on the Citibank website. So again, this is a great resource. Well, I don't know if it's a great resource. You probably don't want to read it right before you go to bed because it can be kind of scary. But notice that not only can you look at the different breaches that have occurred or types of breaches, but you can also focus on different organizational verticals. So if you're in healthcare, you might want to focus on those and see the types of exposures that are potential issues, especially if you're trying to sell this internally or up the chain. So coming back to here, I do have those two URLs listed. And Q, at this time, what I'd like to do is, we have about 8 minutes left in my time slot, is to open up to any calls or questions that are coming through. And we have those over the phone or in chat, is that correct?
Yeah, the questions should come through via chat and Q&A. So everyone, if you have any questions for Christina about any of the information presented, feel free to put those through on the chat or on the Q&A. It should be there on the WebEx station there on your left.
I have those two up here.
Yeah.
So while we're waiting for those to go, and I'm going to go back into the interface. For Q, even if you have some questions that you've heard from your customers about this. I can start with that. Do you have any HIPAA references? We have a number of, if you go to our website, there are a number of public references. Some of them are healthcare. Contact Q and we can get back in touch with you specifically if there are any customers that are not on our reference site that are willing to discuss this.
So one thing that did come through, just a request, was if you could paste the links that you were discussing in the chat box, then people could just...
I'll grab those right now.
Yeah, great.
That's a good idea. Oh, I need to do it to everyone.
Yeah.
There we go.
And then we did have another question come through. It says, we have ZENworks installed in our environment. We have Windows 7 with fairly new machines. But as soon as we install ZENworks on the machines, it takes a lot of time to log in. Is this normal or some mismatch in our configuration?
That's a difficult one to answer just off the top of my head because there needs to be some further investigation as far as what is causing that. What I suggest you do is send Q an email, and he can work with me to get you the right resources for identifying the issue.
Perfect. Great. And we'll see, once again, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to put those through.
Now, another thing I just wanted to revisit while we're looking at this is the full disk encryption. So we've been asked for some time because we have the file and folder level encryption in Endpoint Security Management today, but there are many organizations that are being required to have full disk encryption on all of their laptops. So what we've done is we have partnered with a company. It's called Secude. Let me put that in there just so you can see how that is spelled. It's Secude without the L. And this will be fully integrated into the ZENworks console so that not only will you be able to manage your security policies, but you'll also be able to manage your full disk encryption settings from within ZENworks. And again, that will be available in Service Pack 2, which is slated to the end of this year. Okay, so the question is, you're new to the Novell system. Is this a better tool to use instead of iManage or iRemote, Console 1, and iPrint? So very different scenarios. This is a solution that has consolidated the products that were Zen Desktop Management, Zen Asset Management, Zen Patch Management, and ZenPoint and Endpoint Security Management. Those are all tools that were separate products. About 4 years ago now, we released the configuration management, and we've been adding on this additional functionality as we've gone. Today, that includes the Endpoint Security Management. So this would be a separate solution. It does not require Console 1. It has this web-based console, and then it has its own back-end infrastructure, which can be installed to Linux or Windows. It can be connected to AD or eDirectory, and the database can be a Sybase database under about 1,500 devices, or a SQL or Oracle database for any size organization. So is there an upgrade? Yes, actually, there are a couple different options. Again, this is a question of, is there an upgrade for an organization that already has the different components that we've been talking about under the Now suite? Absolutely, we have that, and we've just recently actually added Endpoint Security Management as an option for Now. So again, if you have any particular questions about how that would work with your set of solutions, reach out to Q or myself directly. Again, I'll put my email address right into the chat as well, So if you have any follow-up on questions, you can do so. As I'm waiting to see, you've also added on-premise to nows. You know, that's a good question. I am not sure on that one. Mike, I'd have to follow up with you on that directly. If you don't mind just sending me an email. Thank you. So one thing I forgot to mention, and this is actually a really cool new functionality. I don't know if you noticed here on my versions, I have some that are sandbox and some that actually have a version number. This sandbox concept applies to all of the policies with Endpoint Security Management, and if you're a configuration management customer, it applies to all the bundles as well. And the sandbox actually, just like it indicates, it's a playground. It's where you can do some testing before publishing this to the audience at large. Now, the advantage of sandboxing is that if a policy is sandboxed and you go to assign it, as you noticed, let me just do that with this global Wi-Fi. I'm going to assign that to some devices. In this case, I'm going to assign it, well, no, I don't want to assign it to my servers. I'm going to assign it just to the Atlanta group. At this point, it asks me, when I go to publish it, oh, it didn't. Oh, it is because it wasn't sandboxed, the one that I chose. But it would prompt me and say, this is a sandboxed application. It's not going to work until you publish it. So it provides another set of security in your testing group so that somebody doesn't go, oh, look at this cool new policy. I want to apply this, I'll use in my group, without it having been vetted and published. So again, I encourage you, I know it was a fairly short presentation time today, to go specifically to the resource library and take a look at these little videos that speak to each of the different areas that we provide functionality and policies around within ZENworks Endpoint Security Management.
All right, great. If there's any other
questions? Did we get all the questions?
I think we got them all, everything that I saw in the chat there. If there's any other ones, feel free to put those through and we can always answer them offline.
Okay.
Thank you, Christina, for the presentation. Great information. And thanks, everyone, for participating today.
Don't forget about Brain Share.
That's right. Make sure to come to Brain Share.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing my desktop so that we can switch it over to the next speaker, and I believe that's Doug. Hi, Doug.
Perfect. We're going to take. I think we're getting him on the line right now.